Adam Navarro stepped into the courthouse lobby with slow, deliberate confidence. At 48, he carried himself with the poise of someone who had weathered storms others only read about. Yet there was something understated in the way he held his shoulders, a careful restraint, as if he were guarding a secret that had shaped his every step. He was dressed in a neatly pressed charcoal suit, a deep navy tie and polished black shoes, yet he attracted the curious stares of passers-by. Perhaps they noticed the faint lines around his eyes that suggested both wisdom and sorrow. Or perhaps it was the rumor, passed along in hushed tones by those who had seen him before, that Adam Navarro was not a lawyer to be trifled with. He paused at the main entrance, running his gaze across the marbled floors and tall columns of the lobby. Sunlight poured through the high windows, illuminating the swirl of attorneys, clerks, and anxious litigants. In one corner, a pair of junior associates whispered conspiratorially, shuffling through paperwork. A bailiff hurried by, barely giving Adam a second glance. Beyond the security checkpoint, an older guard frowned, perhaps curious about Adam's presence at this hour. None of it bothered Adam in the slightest. He set his jaw, walked toward the metal detector, and placed his worn leather briefcase on the conveyor belt. Several quick beeps, a brief once-over from security, and then he was waved through. As he collected his belongings, a couple of attorneys behind him exchanged knowing smiles, as if they recognized him from rumors or distant memory. Adam glanced back. Their smirks were reminiscent of people who believed themselves invincible. He took mental note of their faces but said nothing. Upstairs on the third floor, courtroom 7 was already in session. A crowd had gathered inside, drawn by the high-profile nature of the hearing. On the bench was Judge Tricia Beaumont, known for her razor-sharp wit and cutting remarks. She was feared more for her acidic tongue than her actual rulings, although those were often ferocious too. Judge Beaumont believed she could size up a person within moments of meeting them. She was rarely challenged, and even more rarely proven wrong. When she noticed Adam entering, she permitted herself the slightest arch of an eyebrow, though her attention soon returned to the counsel at the podium. Ms. Castell, are you suggesting we throw out the entire zoning regulation simply because your client claims ignorance? Judge Beaumont asked, her tone dripping with disbelief. This is a court of law, not an elementary school. We don't excuse wrongdoing because someone doesn't know the rules. A scattered ripple of laughter moved through the courtroom. At the prosecution table, a young attorney in a sleek gray suit covered a grin. Adam recognized that attorney. Lucas Rivera, known for a ruthless style. Rivera had a reputation for humiliating opponents in cross-examination, especially those who were underprepared. And Ms. Castell, a woman in her 30s, her expression etched with panic, looked woefully underprepared. Quietly, Adam found a seat in the back row. Several onlookers shuffled aside, giving him space. He leaned his briefcase on his lap and watched the scene unfold. Ms. Castell stammered something about inadvertent violation, her voice trembling so much that Judge Beaumont rolled her eyes. "Is there anyone else who intends to speak in this fiasco?" Judge Beaumont demanded, scanning the gallery with impatience. "If not, I'm ready to issue a ruling. And believe me, it won't be in your favor, Miss Castell." Adam felt a pang of sympathy for the woman at the defense table. Something about her wide-eyed desperation reminded him of an earlier time in his life, a time when he too had been overlooked and written off. He could almost hear the judge's voice from another era mocking him, dismissing him. That memory lingered like a faded scar in his mind. He closed his eyes briefly, thinking, "Not now. I'm here for a different reason." But as he opened them, Miss Castell's frantic gaze seemed to land on him, almost pleading for intervention. The rest of the courtroom was stony, ready to watch her downfall with a mixture of amusement and superiority. Judge Beaumont lifted her gavel. "I'm waiting," she said. "Time is precious. If no one else has anything to add—" Adam stood. He felt a collective rustle of tension behind him, as if everyone in the room realized simultaneously that something unexpected was about to happen. Even Judge Beaumont's eyebrows rose. She peered over her glasses, scanning the gallery, until her critical stare fell upon Adam's steady figure. "May I address the court, Your Honor?" he asked calmly, his voice carrying through the hushed room. Judge Beaumont smirked, a cruel edge twisting her lips. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" Adam stepped forward, ignoring the doubting whispers that erupted around him. "My name is Adam Navarro," he said, his tone polite but firm. "I'm here on behalf of Ms. Castell. I'd like permission to assist in her defense." A ripple of shocked murmurs spread. Even Miss Castell gaped at him in disbelief, as though she had never seen him before in her life. Which was true, but in the moment she was too desperate to question a helping hand. Judge Beaumont leaned back in her tall chair, giving Adam the condescending once-over. "I don't recall your name on the official roster, Mr. Navarro. Are you an attorney of record?" "Not currently on record, Your Honor," Adam replied, "but Miss Castell has just retained me. That is, if you'll allow it." The entire courtroom began buzzing with curiosity. Judge Beaumont tapped a perfectly manicured nail on her bench, seemingly amused. "Retained you? 10 seconds ago she didn't even know your name." Adam held her gaze evenly. "The retainer was finalized roughly 5 seconds before I spoke up, Your Honor." That earned a few chuckles, but the tension still simmered. Judge Beaumont pursed her lips. "I've never heard of you, Navarro. Do you have credentials, or is this another comedic interruption?" He calmly retrieved a folded piece of paper from his briefcase and handed it to the nearest bailiff, who passed it up to the bench. Judge Beaumont scanned it, her eyes darting swiftly from line to line. Everyone watched her reaction. When she finished reading, her lips tightened. A new bar membership. "So, you're an attorney, albeit from another jurisdiction. Fine, but stepping into a near-complete hearing like this, you're either reckless or suicidal." Adam gave a slight shrug. Some might say both. She wasn't used to humility paired with confidence, and for an instant she seemed taken off balance. Her gaze sharpened. "Very well, Mr. Navarro," she said, sounding as though she expected him to fail. "You have 15 minutes to get up to speed. Then I'll allow you to make a statement on Ms. Castell's behalf. Don't waste my time." Adam nodded once. "Thank you, Your Honor." He slid into the chair beside Miss Castell, who stared at him in bewilderment. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He offered a reassuring smile. "Let's just say I've got an interest in cases where the little guy gets trampled. Now quickly, show me your documents." She handed him a disorganized pile, tears forming in her eyes. "I can't thank you enough. Adam waved his hand gently. "Focus on what you have. We'll do gratitude later." He flipped through the pages, scanning them with a remarkable speed that spoke of long years of training and a memory sharper than a blade. Terms like zoning dispute, land development, and unpaid fees caught his eye. The more he read, the deeper he frowned. Judge Beaumont was busy clearing her throat, looking pointedly at the clock. Adam realized time was almost up. Setting the papers down, he nodded to Ms. Castell. "I have enough to make a motion." She blinked at him. "A motion? But we haven't even—" He placed a calming hand on her arm. "Trust me, when you're in the jaws of a lion, sometimes you poke it in just the right spot." She couldn't decide whether that metaphor was horrifying or oddly comforting, but she found no chance to question him further. Judge Beaumont rapped her gavel twice. "Mr. Navarro, I'm waiting." Adam stood, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He stepped to the lectern, aware of how many eyes were on him. The skeptics, the cynics, the predators. He felt the weight of every stare. But he'd been in more harrowing situations than a packed courtroom. He'd once been surrounded by people who wanted to break him, not just embarrass him. He inhaled calmly. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss this entire suit on grounds that the petitioner has misrepresented fundamental facts in their claim." Across the room, Lucas Rivera startled, then burst into laughter. "Is that so, Mr. Navarro? You can't just waltz in here and wave a magic wand. Are you claiming we lied? That's a serious accusation." Adam turned, eyes steady. "I'm not claiming. I'm stating." He reached into his briefcase for a specific page Ms. Castell had given him. "Here we have an inspection notice that clarifies Ms. Castell's property line extends only to a certain boundary. The petitioner's own survey indicates a discrepancy. They've effectively tried to zone Ms. Castell's property outside its legitimate boundary, meaning their entire claim that she's infringing on city land is false. Judge Beaumont leaned forward. "I'd like to see that." The bailiff took the page from Adam and carried it to the bench. Judge Beaumont examined it, her expression growing more constrained by the second. Rivera's cocky grin diminished. A hush fell over the room. That hush was the sound of doubt creeping in. Adam pressed on, his voice firm but respectful. "If Your Honor looks closely at the signature on that survey, it's by the same inspector who signed the petition's central zoning complaint. They claim Ms. Castell was building on city land, but if you read the fine print on the first page, footnote 3 specifically, you'll see they admitted no infiltration into city property. They tried to bury that detail in legalese. That alone invalidates the main complaint." Rivera attempted to interrupt, but Judge Beaumont lifted a hand signaling him to remain silent. She was reading the text meticulously, her lips formed a thin line, the line of a judge who realized she might be on the verge of having her time wasted by a sham claim. It was Miss Castell's turn to look astonished. She hadn't even noticed that footnote. How had Adam spotted it so quickly? Judge Beaumont let out a slow breath, placing the documents aside. "Mr. Rivera, is this accurate?" Rivera rose, face pale. "Your Honor, I need to verify the document's authenticity. It might be forged, or..." Adam held up a second page. "Authentic copy from the municipal record, sealed and notarized. Here's proof it was filed 4 weeks before the lawsuit began." Another wave of uneasy murmurs spread through the courtroom. Judge Beaumont's gaze shot to Rivera. "You'd better have a good explanation for this." Rivera's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, we only had partial files from the city. This might have been missing. If so, we can't be held accountable for an incomplete record." Adam's expression turned a hint sardonic. "In my experience, Mr. Rivera, missing records typically vanish because they might compromise your case, not because of innocent misplacement." Rivera tried to summon back his arrogance. "Your Honor, it's outrageous for him to accuse—" "Silence," Judge Beaumont snapped. "I will not have my courtroom turned into a circus." The tension was palpable. Miss Castell gripped the edge of her table, her eyes wide. Adam caught her gaze and offered a small nod. They were close to unraveling the entire farce. Judge Beaumont set the paper down decisively. "I'm inclined to dismiss the case, but before I do, I want to hear from the city official who signed off on that complaint. Unless they are here, Mr. Rivera, you have a serious credibility issue on your hands." Rivera stammered, "That official was conveniently absent from this hearing, Your Honor. They claimed a scheduling conflict, but if we must bring them in, we'll need time." "Motion to dismiss is granted," Judge Beaumont declared, ignoring his sputtering. "If you want to refile, you'll need to produce fresh evidence and a full justification for how you missed such a critical document." She glanced at Adam. "And next time I suggest you be more upfront with the court about your representation, Mr. Navarro. Though I can't deny you just saved your client's case." Adam bowed his head slightly. "Understood, Your Honor." The gavel hit the sound block and the murmur of shock and relief rippled through the gallery. Ms. Castell turned to Adam, tears brimming. "I don't know how to thank you. You just showed up." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Be glad it's over, at least for now. You'll get formal confirmation soon." She nodded, speechless. Then, as if remembering something crucial, she asked, "But why did you help me?" Adam tucked the file into his briefcase. "Because I can't stand by when someone's being set up by bigger forces. In a world of wolves, it helps to have a bigger wolf on your side." She smiled tremulously. "Do you have an office? I'd like to settle whatever fee." "I'll be in touch," he said quietly, glancing around. Something in his demeanor suggested he had no intention of staying in one place too long. "Take care, Ms. Castell." Before she could reply, he turned and made his way to the back of the courtroom. He ignored the curious stares, the few smiles from those who admired an underdog victory, and the scowls from those who despised having their complacent narratives disrupted. As Adam passed Lucas Rivera, the younger attorney glowered at him, anger simmering in his eyes. Adam stepped into the corridor and closed the heavy wooden door behind him. He let out a slow breath. Out in the hallway, the usual chaos of the courthouse swirled around him. Secretaries with armloads of papers, lawyers bent over phones, and anxious plaintiffs waiting for their cases to be called. None of them seemed to notice the subtle shift in atmosphere that followed him. "Adam Navarro!" a voice called from behind. He turned to see a man in a crisp suit, older, with thinning hair and a stern expression. Adam's jaw tightened slightly at the sight of him. For a moment he considered whether to keep walking, but he sighed and paused. "Clifton Clark," Adam greeted. "It's been a long time." Clark gave a curt nod. "You're back in this city? I thought you left after, well, everyone thought you left for good." Adam's tone was chilly. "I had my reasons." Clark folded his arms. "You know, there are those who still remember how things ended with your last major case here. Some are curious why you're back." Adam met his gaze without flinching. "Let them be curious." Clark's expression flickered. He stepped closer, speaking in a low, urgent tone. "Look, I don't know what you're after, but be careful. Ever since you left, the power dynamics have changed. There are new alliances, new influences. Not everyone will be happy to see you." Adam gave a faint smirk. "Wouldn't be the first time." Clark shook his head, exasperated. "Why come back at all? You managed to get out. Don't you remember how it ended last time? This city tried to break you." Adam's gaze darkened, memories flashing behind his eyes. "I remember," he said quietly. Clark sighed. "Take this as friendly advice. Watch your back. Some old names have resurfaced, and they're not the forgiving type." A chilly weight settled in Adam's chest, but outwardly he remained composed. "I appreciate the warning," he said, turning away, "but I have business here. That's all you need to know." Clark looked like he wanted to say more, but Adam stepped off, moving down the corridor. He didn't want to rehash old scars or dwell on the past. He needed to keep his focus on the present, on the reason he'd returned. A reason that had started with a single folded letter in his mailbox, a cryptic message that read, "Adam, they're at it again." He slipped outside onto the courthouse steps, inhaling the crisp morning air. The sky overhead glowed with a soft, early light. People buzzed around the plaza, hurrying to their offices and errands. Adam paused, scanning the bustling streets. He found some measure of solace in the flow of the crowd, a reminder that life moves on, even when individuals stumble or vanish. He was about to head down the steps when a figure emerged from the crowd, a tall, lean woman in a tailored pantsuit, her black hair pulled back in a tight chignon. She had a portfolio under one arm, and her footsteps exuded a sense of command. Her dark eyes zeroed in on Adam. "Mr. Navarro," she said, tone clipped and efficient. "I was wondering if I might have a moment." He studied her with mild caution. "Depends. Who's asking?" "I'm Sara Grayson," she said, producing a business card that bore the seal of a prominent law firm. "I observed your impromptu performance in courtroom 7. His lips quirked slightly at the word performance. "I didn't realize it was a show." She gave a tiny smirk. "You seem to relish the dramatic, interrupting a near-conclusion hearing, surprising everyone. Let's not pretend you don't know it was theatrical." He tucked the card into his pocket without looking at it. "Maybe. Why do you care?" "I'm curious," she replied simply. "You show up out of nowhere, save a defendant who was about to be crushed, and vanish just as fast. There's talk that you used to be one of the best attorneys in the region, but you left under complicated circumstances." Adam shrugged. "In this line of work, everyone's story is complicated. Good day, Ms. Grayson." He stepped past her, descending the courthouse steps. He half expected her to let him go, but her voice cut through the din of the plaza. "I'd like to offer you a job." That did make him slow, though he didn't look back. "A job doing what?" "There's a case my firm is handling," she said, approaching him once more. "We could use someone with your talent for spotting hidden details. It's a large client. Stanton Industries. They specialize in biotech. They claim they've been wrongly accused of regulatory violations, but there are rumors about unethical practices and a whistleblower who vanished. Adam's posture stiffened. A whistleblower who vanished. The words resonated with a personal memory he'd tried to bury, but he remained outwardly calm, not turning around. "Why are you telling me this?" She angled her head, assessing him. "Because something about the case doesn't add up. I want the truth. My superiors want a victory, any victory, but me? I'd like to find out if Stanton Industries is truly innocent or if they've buried their secrets, and I think you'd be good at uncovering secrets." He slowly turned his gaze to her. "Secrets can be dangerous, Miss Grayson." She crossed her arms. "So can letting corruption run free." In the hush between them, he felt the flicker of an old fire, the one that used to burn bright in him before heartbreak and betrayal had forced him to leave town. The conviction that justice had to be pursued, even if it was hidden beneath layers of wealth and deceit. He had promised himself he'd never dive into these waters again, but the letter he received, the quiet plea for help that had summoned him back, suggested that fate had a different plan. He glanced at Miss Grayson's business card. "I'll think about it," she nodded. "Time is of the essence. Let me know soon." He nodded, turned away, and vanished into the throng. The city enveloped him, the noise a strange comfort in its familiarity. As he walked, he found an empty bench in a small courtyard behind an office building, quiet enough to let him gather his thoughts. He recalled a phrase often quoted by his father when he was a boy, a phrase that echoed in memories of simpler days. "In the end, we must fight for what's right, not for what's easy." It was the kind of adage that someone in their 40s or 50s might remember from parents or mentors, a steady refrain. Adam sighed, half smiling to himself. His father had believed wholeheartedly in justice, a belief that once guided Adam's entire life until his illusions were shattered by a rigged system. Still, that old flame refused to die. Maybe that was why he'd spoken up for Miss Castell. Maybe that was why Miss Grayson's mention of a whistleblower stirred something within him. And maybe that was why he'd returned after all these years, heedless of the dangers lurking. Later that day, Adam stepped into a modest apartment he was renting on a short-term basis. It was furnished just enough to pass muster, a couch, a small kitchen table, a bed. But the walls were devoid of personal touches. He didn't intend to stay in one place long. On the table lay a single envelope with no return address, the same one that had pulled him back into this city like a magnet. He took it in his hands, opened it once more. The paper inside was typed, not handwritten. "Adam, they are at it again, hiding behind the law, using fear and money to destroy lives. If you care about the people who cannot defend themselves, come back. Not many can stop them, but you might." No name. No further explanation, yet he had known precisely what it meant. There was only one them, he recognized, an all-powerful alliance of wealthy interests and officials who operated in the shadows. They had tried to ruin him once. They had almost succeeded. He placed the paper down and stared out the window at the city lights. Then he pulled out Miss Grayson's card, tapped it lightly against his fingertips, and contemplated the next step. The Stanton Industries case might only be a piece of a bigger puzzle. If that puzzle led back to the same network that had forced him out, then maybe this was the path to strike at the heart of the beast. "Sometimes," he murmured to himself, "you have to walk into the lion's den to show the lion it's not invincible." The next morning, Adam dialed the number on Miss Grayson's card. She answered on the third ring. "I take it you've decided?" "I'll look at the files," he said. "But I don't promise anything beyond that. Where do I meet you?" Soon they agreed upon a discreet cafe near the courthouse. It was early, and the city had just begun to stir with the usual rush. Adam arrived first, ordering a simple black coffee and positioning himself in a corner booth. He could watch the entrance without being easily seen. Miss Grayson entered, scanning the patrons. She spotted Adam and joined him, setting a slim folder on the table. "Morning," she said, her tone businesslike. Adam nodded. "Let's see what you've got." She slid the folder over. He opened it to find a concise summary. "Stanton Industries is accused of dumping toxic materials into local waterways. Several employees have come forward, anonymously, claiming the upper management authorized the concealment of data regarding side effects of a newly developed vaccine. But the primary whistleblower, a certain Dr. Lionel Baxter, vanished a month ago. Adam's gaze lingered on a photograph clipped to the corner. A middle-aged man, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, smiling gently at the camera. When was he last seen? Ms. Grayson pointed to a paragraph. He checked out of his office late on a Thursday and never returned. No calls, no emails, no credit card usage. The authorities considered it a missing persons case, but it hasn't gone anywhere. Meanwhile, Stanton denies everything and insists Dr. Baxter is simply on an extended leave. Adam closed the folder. You said your firm is representing Stanton. Why give me these details if your role is to defend them? She leaned in, lowering her voice. Because something feels wrong? A colleague overheard the lead partner telling Stanton, "Don't worry, we can bury the whistleblower story. Navarro used to handle these kinds of fiascos, but he's out of the picture now. They have no idea you're back, or if they do, they haven't connected the dots. I want to know if Stanton is innocent or guilty. If they're guilty, I'd rather see them exposed than help them cover up wrongdoing." Adam tapped the folder's cover thoughtfully. "You're risking your career." She forced a tight smile. "I'm risking more than that. But I've heard rumors about you, Mr. Navarro, that you once took down a corrupt district attorney who is sending innocent people to prison for personal gain, that you shredded him in court, that you always find the hole in the wall." He sipped his coffee, eyes flicking to her. "Rumors tend to be embellished." "Maybe," she said, "but I'm banking on the chance some of them are true. I can pass you more documents. If we can prove Stanton's wrongdoing, you can help me find a way to stop them from hurting more people. If they're clean, you'll see for yourself." He paused, the old moral compass swirling inside him. Then, "All right, let's see where this leads." They agreed to meet again in 2 days. Ms. Grayson would pass him everything she could discreetly obtain, reports, internal memos, anything hinting at the cover-up. As she left, Adam noticed the anxious set of her shoulders, the tension coiled under her professional facade. She was risking a great deal for the sake of truth. It was the kind of risk Adam knew well. After finishing his coffee, he left the cafe, stepping onto the sidewalk. In a quiet murmur, he recalled another adage, one that middle-aged folks often shared among themselves when grappling with big dilemmas. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. His father's words again. He exhaled, feeling the city's pulse around him. He found his mind drifting to Dr. Baxter, banished, possibly threatened or worse. Adam recognized how these incidents tended to go. People with the courage to stand up to powerful corporations often paid the steepest price. And if Stanton truly had that lethal combination of money and connections, Dr. Baxter's disappearance might be the tip of a toxic iceberg. He just reached the next intersection when a voice behind him said, "Mr. Navarro, so good to see you again." The tone was smug, laced with threat. Adam turned to see Lucas Rivera approaching, that same arrogance plastered on his face, but there was also an undercurrent of anger. "Mr. Rivera?" Adam greeted, stifling a sigh. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Rivera shrugged. "I noticed your stunt in court yesterday. Impressive, I suppose, if you like cheap theatrics, but you should be careful. Jumping into cases at the last minute can be dangerous." Adam's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that advice or a warning?" "Both," Rivera answered smoothly. He gestured to a black sedan idling nearby. "There are certain people who prefer the status quo to remain unchallenged. You were out of the picture for a long time. Maybe you should stay out." Adam locked eyes with him. "I make my own decisions." Rivera gave a short, sarcastic laugh. "Of course you do, but some decisions come with consequences." He slipped a business card into Adam's coat pocket. "If you find your path getting rocky, give me a call. Maybe I'll help you find a safer route." With that, Rivera strolled off. Adam watched him go, uncertain whether to be amused or alarmed. The card in his pocket felt like a loaded reminder of how quickly alliances and threats could shift in this city. The lines between friend and foe were notoriously blurry. Back at his apartment, Adam placed Miss Grayson's folder on the table next to the mysterious letter. He lay on the couch, arms folded behind his head, staring at the ceiling. The old sense of adrenaline, of chasing a hidden truth, coursed through him. But so did the memory of betrayal, the memory of how quickly the system had turned on him. He recalled the final confrontation years ago, standing in front of a judge who had been bought by a coalition of wealthy players. Adam had presented evidence of corruption only to be met with sanctioned hurdles that nearly destroyed his credibility. In the end, he'd fought back with an unexpected witness, a direct confrontation that had left him triumphant, but at a terrible personal cost. Friends had vanished, acquaintances had turned away, and Adam had left the city entirely, convinced he would never return. Yet here he was. That night he fell asleep with an uneasy mind, drifting in and out of dreams filled with images of missing whistleblowers and red-stamped documents. Each time he dozed off, he saw Dr. Baxter's photograph. In one scene, Dr. Baxter turned to him, lips parted, as if about to reveal a secret, but no sound came out. Only a silence that spoke volumes. It was a reminder that sometimes the loudest pleas for help come from those who cannot speak at all. Morning arrived, bringing a drizzle of rain that coated the streets with a gentle sheen. Adam made his way through the city to a small law library tucked in a quiet corner near the university. Few people visited it now, given the digital age's convenience, but Adam liked the solidity of physical records. There he spent hours rummaging through archived regulatory documents related to Stanton Industries. He found references to chemical compounds, permits for research labs, expansions into new markets, everything carefully sanitized, all perfectly legal on the surface. But something pricked at him, references to Project Aurora, which was repeatedly mentioned but never explained. He stumbled on a single line in an old filing. Project Aurora, preliminary testing phases for advanced immunology compounds, then no subsequent data. It was as if the entire project had been scrubbed from existence. He left the library as evening fell, stepping onto the street with a copy of that single reference in his folder. The city lights glowed against the wet pavement, and a swirl of car horns, footsteps, and voices filled the air. He started toward his apartment when a text message from Ms. Grayson beeped on his phone. "Urgent, come to Willow Park." Willow Park at night was deserted, the path lit only by a few dim lamps. Adam spotted Ms. Grayson sitting on a bench, glancing around nervously. He approached quietly, searching for any sign of danger. She looked up, startled. "Thank God you came. I think someone's following me." Adam frowned, scanning the darkness. "You shouldn't be out here alone. What happened?" She clutched a thick envelope. "I left the office after hours. A package was delivered for me, no label, no return address. Inside were these." She handed the envelope to Adam. He took it and pulled out several documents. They were stamped confidential, referencing Project Aurora, chemical breakdowns, mortality rates in lab tests, a list of names, possibly test subjects. One line read, "Adverse effects, suppressed for internal review only." Another read, "Mass recall recommended by Dr. Lionel Baxter due to potential fatalities." Adam felt his stomach twist. The docs were damning. Stanton not only knew of lethal side effects, but had intentionally suppressed them. Where did this come from? Ms. Grayson shook her head. "No idea. It just appeared on my desk." The note said, "They paid me to silence this, but I can't do it anymore. Get it to Navarro." He tensed. "They're specifically referencing me?" She nodded. "Which means the rumor about your return is out. And if these documents are real, Stanton lied about almost everything. Dr. Baxter tried to blow the whistle, and that's likely why he disappeared." Adam's eyes hardened. "We have proof Stanton's product is lethal. They tried to hide it, and Baxter was silenced." He rubbed his forehead. "We need to verify the authenticity, but if it's genuine, this could be explosive." Miss Grayson swallowed. "I'm sure it's genuine, but if they're onto me, onto us, how do we proceed? Stanton's legal team, our own colleagues, might be complicit. They could try to bury this or smear me." Adam felt a familiar resolve setting in. First, we make copies. Several. Then we safeguard them in multiple places. We gather more proof that these documents are legitimate, and we find out what happened to Dr. Baxter. If he's alive, we need his testimony. She nodded, exhaling shakily. Right. I'll do it. But tonight I'm crashing at a friend's place. I don't trust going home. Adam handed her back a few pages. Keep these hidden. I'll scan the rest. Contact me using a secure phone. We'll meet in 2 days. She rose from the bench. Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Really, if I hadn't found you, he nodded. Stay safe, Miss Grayson. When she hurried off, Adam lingered, scanning the shadowy perimeter of the park. There was no obvious sign of watchers, but the uneasy feeling in his chest refused to subside. He suspected that from this point on, every move would be under scrutiny. The following day, he locked himself in his apartment with a borrowed scanner and encrypted everything onto a flash drive. Then he carefully stashed the original papers in a safe deposit box under an assumed name. He didn't want to leave anything to chance. Late that evening, he received a call from a blocked number. When he answered, a quiet, trembling voice spoke. Mr. Navarro? We haven't met. My name is Clara Dawson. Adam's grip on the phone tightened. He recognized that name. She was Dr. Baxter's research assistant, mentioned in a footnote in the files. Yes, Miss Dawson? How did you get my number? She hesitated. A mutual friend in the district attorney's office gave it to me. Said I could trust you. I'm in trouble. They're watching me, waiting for me to slip up. I need help. Adam's heart pounded. Where are you? She gave him an address, a dilapidated motel on the edge of the city. He quickly noted it. Stay put. I'll be there in an hour, and don't open the door for anyone else. He grabbed a jacket, the flash drive, and hurried out. A new wave of adrenaline flooded him. If Clara Dawson was still around, she might have direct knowledge of Project Aurora. She might know exactly how Stanton silenced Baxter. The motel was in a grimy district, neon signs blinking ominously along the deserted streets. Adam parked a block away, scanning for suspicious vehicles. Then he walked to room 214. Clara opened the door a crack, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. She let him in quickly, bolting the lock behind him. The room was small, the scent of stale cigarette smoke lingering. Clara looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. Thank you for coming, she whispered. He nodded, noticing the disarray of papers on the bed, some referencing Stanton, others referencing Dr. Baxter's research. Tell me everything, he said gently. She sank onto the edge of the bed, trembling. I worked closely with Dr. Baxter. He discovered the vaccine was causing severe complications, organs failing, immune systems crashing. He gathered files, determined we should alert the authorities. But the board of Stanton shut him down. That's when he decided to come forward as a whistleblower. Next thing I knew, he disappeared. Stanton claimed he resigned. Adam listened intently. Have you gone to the police? She shook her head. I can't. Stanton has people everywhere. They'll brand me a liar or worse. And I don't have proof of the actual side effects. Baxter took those final reports with him, hoping to leak them. But I do know where he might have hidden a backup. Adam's pulse quickened. A backup? Clara nodded, lowering her voice. Told me once that if anything happened to him, I should look in the place where hope died for many but began for me. That's all he said. Some cryptic clue, but I think it refers to an old clinic on the outskirts. Baxter used to volunteer there when he was starting out. Adam remembered one of the documents Ms. Grayson handed him, a mention that Baxter had begun his career at a free clinic that closed down due to funding issues. The Hartley Free Clinic? Clara's eyes lit up. Yes, that must be it. He told me he had a safe there, hidden behind the supply cabinets. If the documents are still there, that's the proof we need. Adam considered the danger. Stanton might also suspect that. They could have already searched the place. But it's worth checking. Clara nodded, tears brimming. I can't go alone. They'll find me. He reached out, placing a reassuring hand over hers. You won't be alone. We'll do it carefully. They made a plan to head there the next night, when fewer eyes would be around. Meanwhile, Clara would remain in hiding, changing motels if necessary. Adam copied her papers, adding them to his growing trove of evidence. Before leaving, he paused at the door. "Miss Dawson," he said softly, "thank you for trusting me. We'll figure this out." She forced a weary smile. "Dr. Baxter believed there were still good people out there. I'm hoping he was right." Adam left, feeling the weight of her hope on his shoulders. He had no illusions that Stanton would stand idly by if they discovered this plan. People with power seldom allowed threats to their empire to flourish, but something in Adam's gut told him it was now or never. Sometimes the only way to ensure justice is to confront the darkness head-on. The next day, Ms. Grayson texted him. "We have to talk. Something big happened at the firm." They met again at a different cafe, even smaller and more tucked away. She arrived looking tense, scanning the street behind her. "What's wrong?" Adam asked as she sat down. She swallowed nervously. "My boss summoned me, asked me point blank if I was feeding information to an outside party. He suspects I have a source who's undermining Stanton's defense. There were thinly veiled threats about my future at the firm." She ran a hand over her hair, trying to steady herself. "I'm officially on leave, and by that I mean they shoved me out the door to keep me away from Stanton's files." Adam leaned back. "They're closing ranks." "Yes, but before they kicked me out, I overheard a phone call. It was between the lead partner and someone from Stanton. They mentioned a name. Callum Hess. Stanton's head of security, apparently. Hess is tasked with neutralizing the problem. That has to mean us, or the whistleblowers, or both." Adam felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. "Then we need to move fast. We might be dealing with more than just intimidation." They hashed out the details of the upcoming plan. That night, Adam and Clara would go to the clinic. Miss Grayson would stand by with a secure channel to help them if they needed immediate contact with an ally. Miss Grayson offered to come along, but Adam insisted on limiting the number of people at risk. Instead, Miss Grayson would keep watch from her car a few blocks away, ready to call for help if things went wrong. By the time the moon rose, Adam was parked in an abandoned lot near the defunct Hartley Free Clinic. The place was a single-story building with boarded-up windows, an eerie silence surrounding it. Street lights flickered in the distance. Clara waited in his car, trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "You sure we can't wait for daylight?" she whispered. "Daylight means potential bystanders and Stanton's watchers might catch on," Adam said quietly. "Plus, there's a better chance we'll remain unseen under cover of darkness." They crept across the overgrown yard, found a side entrance with a rusted lock, and managed to pry it open. Inside, the corridor was dimly lit by the glow of Clara's phone flashlight. Dust coated the floors and the air smelled of mold and neglect. Paint peeled off the walls, revealing the bleak memories of what used to be a lifeline for the less fortunate. They reached the supply room Baxter had mentioned. Old shelves, empty cabinets. Clara shone the flashlight around. He said behind the leftmost cabinet there was a hidden compartment. "I think we have to move this entire shelving unit." Together they heaved and slid the tall shelving unit away from the wall. Behind it, a portion of the plaster appeared mismatched. Clara inhaled sharply. That must be it. She used a pocket knife to pry the thin layer of plaster, revealing a small metal safe embedded in the wall. Adam knelt to inspect it. It had a combination lock. "Any idea what the code might be?" Clara chewed her lip. "He once said something about using the date he started working at the clinic as a reminder of his mission." Adam nodded, recalling Dr. Baxter's employment records from Ms. Grayson's documents. He started on May 13, 15 years ago, so maybe 513. They tried it, no click. Clara tried 1,305, still no luck. Adam stared at the lock, thinking, maybe it's the year. 15 years ago, 2 digits plus the month and day, that'd be 2008 or 8. Then 513. He spun the dial. 080513. No response. He frowned. Let's consider the day, month, year format. 1305208. After carefully rotating the numbers, there was a faint click. Clara exhaled in relief as Adam gently pulled the safe door open. Inside were manila folders stuffed with pages, a small flash drive, and a worn leather notebook. Clara's flashlight flickered over the documents. This could be everything Dr. Baxter compiled. Adam picked up the notebook, flipping through it. Handwritten notes, references to tests that led to organ failure in lab animals, urgent pleas to superiors for a recall, repeated mentions of Project Aurora. He whistled under his breath. This is the smoking gun. But at that exact moment they heard footsteps. Outside the door someone was moving, the sound of boots scraping across debris. Clara froze, terror in her eyes. Adam held a finger to his lips, motioning her to step back. He slid the safe's contents into his backpack, then carefully lowered the shelf to obscure the opening. A flashlight beam cut through the crack in the door. A hushed voice said, "I heard something in here." Another voice responded, "We'll check it out. The boss wants the files. If Navarro's inside, we take him down." Clara's eyes widened. Adam pulled her behind the shelving unit. A single thought ran through his mind. Hess's people found them. The situation had escalated from stealth to survival. The doorknob rattled. The door opened slowly, and two figures slipped in, each holding flashlights and guns. They shone the beams around. "Seems empty," one muttered, stepping further inside. Adam's heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. He gestured for Clara to stay put. Then, bracing himself, he leapt from behind the shelving unit, slamming into the nearest intruder, knocking the flashlight out of his grip. The room plunged into semi-darkness. The second intruder cursed, whirling, but Adam grabbed the first man's wrist, forcing the gun down. The weapon fired a shot into the floor, the deafening crack echoing. Clara muffled a scream as Adam wrestled with the man, eventually twisting his arm so that he dropped his gun. But the second man lunged, catching Adam on the side with a sharp blow from the butt of his weapon. Adam staggered. The first man tried to recover, but Adam recovered faster, slamming an elbow into his ribs. Clara darted from behind the shelf and dashed toward the door. "Adam, we have to go!" He managed to disarm the second man by knocking the gun from his grasp. It slid across the dusty floor. Without missing a beat, Adam kicked one intruder's legs out from under him and seized the chance to sprint after Clara. The men lay on the floor, groaning in pain, but it wouldn't keep them down for long. Out in the corridor, Adam and Clara ran for the exit. They emerged into the night, breath ragged, heart pounding. Miss Grayson's car sat idling at the far end of the block. She stepped out, shouting, "This way!" They raced toward her. Behind them, the intruders stumbled out of the clinic, shouting. Another shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off the curb. Clara cried out in terror, but Adam yanked her forward, pushing her into Miss Grayson's car. Adam dove into the back seat, and Miss Grayson floored the accelerator, tires squealing as they sped away. Everyone was trembling. Miss Grayson glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "Are you okay? What happened?" Adam clutched his side, wincing. "We found what Baxter left behind, but so did Stanton's men." Clara hugged the backpack. "We have the proof. Everything." Miss Grayson exhaled shakily. "Then we need to figure out how to use it before they find us." They drove in tense silence to a safe house Miss Grayson had arranged, a small apartment above an old bakery owned by a friend who was out of town. Once inside, Adam locked the door and slumped into a chair, clutching his bruised ribs. Clara set the backpack on the table, unzipping it to reveal the documents and notebook. Miss Grayson stared at them, her face pale. "So it's all true," she said in a low voice, flipping through pages that detailed the monstrous side effects of Project Aurora. "They're knowingly endangering thousands. And Dr. Baxter vanished because he was about to blow the whistle." Clara nodded miserably. "This is exactly the kind of research that would force a full-scale investigation. Stanton must be terrified." Adam rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We have to bring this to the authorities, but not the local ones. Stanton's influence is too strong here. We need federal intervention, or a specialized unit that can't be bought." Miss Grayson hesitated, exchanging a look with Adam. "Adam, there's one person who might help. A special prosecutor named Raquel Lynn. She's known for being incorruptible, and she has federal connections. If we can get these documents to her, she might launch a top-level investigation. He nodded. Let's do it, but we'll need to be careful. Stanton won't stop until they've either retrieved or destroyed this evidence. Clara squeezed her eyes shut. I'm so scared. They shot at us, they could kill us. Adam moved over, placing a hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing. You risked everything to protect innocent people. Courage is fear holding on a minute longer. He recalled that old phrase, something a middle-aged soldier he once knew had quoted to him. Clara let out a shaky breath, nodding. The next day, Ms. Grayson made contact with someone in the federal prosecutor's office. A discreet meeting was arranged for midnight at a secure location. Adam, Clara, and Ms. Grayson kept a low profile throughout the day, changing vehicles, staying off the main roads. Twice they suspected a black SUV was tailing them, and they made quick detours. When midnight approached, they arrived at a nondescript building near the outskirts of the city. In a dimly lit parking lot, they met a woman in a crisp black suit. Raquel Lynn. She was accompanied by two agents whose stern faces radiated readiness. You must be Navarro, Lynn said, studying him. Her gaze shifted to Clara and Miss Grayson. I've heard a lot in the last 24 hours. Adam handed over the folder and the notebook. Everything we have on Stanton's Project Aurora. We also have digital copies on these flash drives. Please keep them safe. Lynn flipped through the pages, her brow knitting. If this is authentic, it's a bombshell. Environmental crimes, fraud, possible manslaughter charges if the side effects have already harmed anyone. She glanced at Clara. You worked with Dr. Baxter, Clara nodded tearfully. Yes, he's missing. Lynn's expression turned grim. We'll put out a search through federal channels. If Stanton's behind his disappearance, we'll find out. She looked at Adam. Thank you for bringing this to me. I understand you had a rough exit from the system a few years back? Adam's jaw tightened. That's in the past. We're here now. Lynn nodded. Understood. We'll keep you updated. But be prepared. It won't be a simple matter of a few subpoenas. With stakes this high, Stanton and whoever backs them will fight tooth and nail. I suggest you all find somewhere safe to stay while we proceed. My agents will coordinate protection if needed. They parted ways, with Lynn disappearing into the night, the evidence in her care. For the first time in days, Adam felt a flicker of relief. They had passed the crucial proof to someone beyond Stanton's grasp. Yet he knew it was only the beginning. Miss Grayson let out a long breath as they got back into the car. We did it, right? We got the evidence to the right hands? Clara offered a tremulous smile. Dr. Baxter's work won't be for nothing. Adam nodded. Now we wait for the wheels of justice to turn. Yet a gnawing worry lingered. He remembered how powerful forces could manipulate or intimidate even federal officials. They'd done it before, but for now they had done all they could. 2 weeks passed in tense limbo. They heard from Lynn only sporadically, mostly to confirm the documents were being analyzed by experts. Meanwhile, rumors reached them that Stanton's stock was plummeting due to leaked stories in the press about serious allegations. Lucas Rivera vanished from the city's public eye, and Ms. Grayson's old firm tried to distance itself from Stanton. During that time, Adam, Clara, and Ms. Grayson stuck together for safety. They relocated to an out-of-city motel, keeping a low profile. Adam found himself forging a tentative friendship with them, an unexpected sense of camaraderie that softened his guarded nature. Sometimes, in the quiet hours, they'd share stories of how they'd come to care about truth more than comfort. Clara would recall her admiration for Dr. Baxter's companion. Ms. Grayson would admit she'd been a cutthroat litigator until a pro bono case opened her eyes to corporate greed. And Adam told them only bits and pieces of his past, enough to hint at the battles he'd fought and the cost he'd paid. One evening, after a modest dinner, they sat around a small table in the motel room. The TV murmured in the background, broadcasting a local news report about corporate corruption. Clara turned to Adam, curiosity shining in her eyes. Is it true you once took on a district attorney who framed innocent people? Adam stared at his coffee cup. Yes. He was funneling confessions out of vulnerable individuals, forging evidence to boost his conviction rate. He had help, judges, cops, even the press. I found a witness who could prove it all. We cornered him in court. It was a big win, but it made me a lot of enemies. After the dust settled, I left. I was tired. Miss Grayson reached over and touched his arm lightly. You gave up your career for justice. Adam shrugged. I gave up illusions. My father used to say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, but sometimes it's the tough who end up battered beyond recognition. They sat in silence, a shared understanding settling among them. In a low voice, Clara said, "But you came back. A hero is someone who steps forward when everyone else steps back." That's a saying my grandmother used to share. Adam smiled faintly. I'm no hero, Clara. I just hate bullies. The next morning brought a startling twist. Raquel Lynn reached out to them on a secure line, her tone urgent. She had new information. Stanton's chief financial officer had been arrested while trying to flee the country, carrying evidence of massive financial fraud. The case against Stanton was reaching a crescendo. Indictments were expected within days. And Dr. Baxter? Clara asked, voice trembling. Lynn hesitated. He's still missing, but we haven't stopped searching. Meanwhile, we have enough to move forward. The next big step is a court hearing. Stanton's lawyers are requesting a preliminary injunction to block the release of these documents to the public. We need you, Ms. Dawson, and you, Mr. Navarro, to testify. Yes, your statements will be crucial in proving the authenticity of the files and the circumstances under which you obtained them. The hearing is tomorrow. He exchanged glances with Ms. Grayson and Clara. Stanton's men have tried to kill us, once. If we show up in open court, we'll be targets. Lynn's voice was firm. You'll have federal protection. The hearing will be in a secure courtroom. We have to do this, or the judge might be swayed to keep the evidence sealed. They agreed. Fear warred with resolve, but they all knew the significance of this hearing. Without public disclosure, Stanton might wriggle free. The next day dawned gray, with clouds looming overhead. At the federal courthouse, extra security surrounded the building. Agents escorted Adam, Clara, and Ms. Grayson to a reserved waiting area. The tension was palpable. In the courtroom, a federal judge presided. Stanton's lawyers were present, looking grim. Adam recognized none of them. These were top-tier litigators from out of state. Their lead counsel, a tall man with silver hair and a dangerously smooth manner, began by claiming the documents were obtained illegally and lacked proper chain of custody. He demanded they be suppressed. Lynn countered by calling Adam and Clara to the stand. When Adam testified about how they discovered the hidden safe, the attackers in the clinic, and the authenticity checks they'd performed on the data, the hush in the courtroom was electrifying. Clara testified about Baxter's warnings, how he'd vanished, and the lethal side effects she'd personally observed in test subjects. Each word she spoke trembled with honesty and fear. Stanton's lawyer cross-examined them ruthlessly, suggesting they'd orchestrated a break-in, implying they had personal vendettas. But Adam remained unflappable under questioning, calmly pointing out that if they had stolen or forged documents, they wouldn't have risked their lives in a shootout. Clara, though shaken, insisted on the veracity of Baxter's concerns. Finally, the judge frowned at Stanton's counsel. I see no credible basis to suppress these documents. The evidence suggests Stanton has deliberately hidden dangerous research. If your client wants to dispute the claims, they can do so at trial, but these documents will remain in the public record. A wave of relief rippled through Adam, Clara, and Ms. Grayson. Stanton's team looked furious. The gavel came down. Motion to seal is denied. Outside, camera crews waited, eager for a statement. Federal agents whisked them past the frenzy of reporters. In the swirl of flashing lights and clamoring voices, Adam caught sight of Lucas Rivera, standing near the edge of the crowd, wearing a discreet expression that might have been respect or perhaps resentment. Their gazes locked for a moment, but neither spoke. Then Adam was guided away. They reconvened with Lynn in a secure corridor, where she offered them an approving nod. Thanks to you, we can proceed with formal charges. This is a major step toward accountability. Clara let out a breath of relief, tears glistening in her eyes. "Dr. Baxter, wherever he is, I hope he knows we did it." Lynn's phone buzzed, and she stepped aside to answer. When she returned, her expression was somber. "We just got a tip that a body matching Dr. Baxter's description was found at an abandoned property outside the city. I'm so sorry." Clara's face crumpled, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Miss Grayson lowered her head. Adam felt his heart sink, a familiar surge of anger and grief clashing in his chest. Baxter had sacrificed everything to reveal the truth. Stanton's men, or those in their network, had likely disposed of him. Lynn spoke softly. "We'll confirm the identity, but if it's him, we'll add murder charges, I promise you." They left the courthouse in a subdued state, success overshadowed by tragedy. Clara said little, lost in her thoughts of Dr. Baxter's kindness and brilliance. Miss Grayson wore a haunted look, as though realizing just how high the cost of truth could be. Adam walked with them, weighed down by a sense of déjà vu. He had once known the triumph of exposing corruption, only to lose someone close to him in the aftermath. They stood outside in the gray daylight. Microphones hovered, reporters begging for a statement. Ms. Grayson answered a few questions carefully, acknowledging that the evidence was overwhelming, but justice would take time. Clara, her eyes swollen, declined to speak, clutching Adam's arm. Adam offered a single comment. "We do this for the countless people who never got a chance to speak. Dr. Baxter was one such voice. Let's not lose sight of that." Then, amid the media chaos, a solitary figure approached. A woman in a dark trench coat, wearing sunglasses despite the gloom. She paused in front of Adam, removing her sunglasses to reveal tear-streaked eyes. "My name is Lydia Baxter," she said softly. "Lionel's wife." Adam's throat constricted. Clara gently squeezed Lydia's hand. "We're so sorry. Lionel was a hero." Lydia's voice trembled. "I always told him to be careful, but he said sometimes you have to risk everything so others can live safely. That was his motto. Thank you for not letting his work disappear." Adam felt tears burn at the corners of his own eyes. He nodded. "We'll make sure his sacrifice isn't forgotten." In the following days, formal charges were brought against Stanton Industries: manslaughter, conspiracy, environmental crimes. The board was dismantled. A wave of smaller lawsuits from victims and families came pouring in. Miss Grayson discovered her old firm was under investigation for aiding corporate cover-ups. She resigned, deciding to start a practice focused on ethical advocacy. Clara, though devastated by Baxter's death, found some closure in helping other potential whistleblowers come forward. Adam quietly assisted them, providing counsel. During a small gathering at Miss Grayson's new office, they toasted to the memory of Dr. Baxter and to the resilience of truth. Someone suggested that Adam return to full-time lawyering. He just smiled wryly. "I don't need a formal job title to do what's right," he said, repeating an old sentiment. "This whole city is a battleground for justice." In the weeks that followed, Adam prepared to leave again. The city felt both familiar and foreign, a place where he had triumphed and suffered in equal measure. On his final day, he headed to a quiet cafe near the courthouse, the same one where Miss Grayson had first approached him. He sat sipping a black coffee, reflecting on the whirlwind of events. He heard a commotion behind him. Turning, he saw Judge Tricia Beaumont. Ironically, she was stepping into the cafe to order coffee to go. When their eyes met, she smirked faintly. "Mr. Navarro, causing trouble as usual?" He almost chuckled. "Your Honor. Surprised to see you in a place like this." She shrugged. "I'm human. I need coffee too. Word around the courthouse says you had a hand in dismantling a corporate giant." Adam shrugged. "I had help." She studied him a moment. "You made me rethink a few assumptions. That's not easy to do." Then, with a small nod, she added, "Don't be a stranger." And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind a faint sense of respect shared between two people who had once been on opposing sides. Adam finished his coffee, left a few bills on the counter, and stepped outside. The day was bright, the city brimming with life. He walked toward his car where Clara and Miss Grayson waited to bid him farewell. Miss Grayson wore a soft smile. "I wish you'd stay," he shook his head gently. "This city has enough heroes now. You, Clara, Lynn, you'll keep the fire burning." Clara's eyes shone with gratitude. "Thank you, Adam, for everything." He nodded. "Take care. And remember, justice is the sum of all moral duty." Another old quote that's always stayed with me. They embraced briefly, then Adam climbed into his car. As he pulled away, he caught a glimpse of them in the rearview mirror. Two people who'd found new strength in adversity, forging a path forward for those who had been silenced. He drove through the city streets, memories rising like ghosts at every corner. At a stoplight, he remembered the day he first arrived, the day he decided to speak up for Miss Castell, the day he realized that no matter how far he ran, destiny would keep drawing him back to the fight against injustice. Now, with Stanton toppled and Dr. Baxter's legacy assured, Adam felt a sense of completion. Not closure, perhaps, because closure would never bring back the lives lost or the whistleblower who was silenced, but a sense of purpose fulfilled. Another battle fought, another truth revealed. And there would always be more battles, more truths lurking in the shadows. Yet for a moment, he savored the peaceful knowledge that at least here, for now, decency had prevailed. He recalled something his father often said, the wisdom that resonates more powerfully with every passing year. It's never too late to do the right thing, and it's never too soon to start. He smiled to himself as the traffic light turned green. Maybe he would finally stop believing that justice always lost. In the quiet enclaves of a city battered by corruption, he had witnessed real victory, painful though it was. He left the city limits behind, the road stretching out in front of him. In the passenger seat lay the letter that had summoned him back, the words a testament to the enduring spirit of those who refused to yield to greed. He read it one last time. They're at it again. Come back. He folded it gently, tucking it away. He'd answered that call, and one day, if needed, he might answer again. Because the fight for justice is endless, and sometimes the best we can do is stand up when no one else will. In the distance, the sun dipped low, painting the sky with a gentle orange glow. Adam accelerated, heading toward an uncertain horizon, yet feeling just a bit more hopeful than before. And thus, in the wake of Dr. Baxter's sacrifice, Ms. Dawson's courage, Ms. Grayson's moral stand, and Adam Navarro's steadfast resolve, the city learned a timeless lesson, that even the greatest powers can be toppled by the quiet perseverance of those who won't be silenced. As a familiar quote goes, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that." For middle-aged souls who've seen their share of defeats, it's a reminder that the flame of justice, however flickering, is never truly extinguished, if we choose to keep it burning. In the end, the memory of Dr. Baxter's unwavering belief in truth served as a compass for them all. Though scars remained and fresh challenges awaited, the triumph of integrity lit a path forward. Adam Navarro had no illusions that evil would vanish. It never does. But each victory, each spark of courage, chips away at the darkness a little more. He once told Ms. Castell, "Redemption comes to those who fight for what's right, no matter the cost." And so, to anyone who has doubted whether good can prevail, their story answers, yes, it can, if you're willing to stand up when everything tries to push you down. When asked what lasting wisdom he would give to others in the aftermath of Stanton's downfall, Adam offered these reflections. First, that justice is a marathon, not a sprint. Rarely does one blow topple a fortress, but persistence wears down the mightiest walls. Second, that underestimating the seemingly powerless can be the gravest mistake. Sometimes it's the quiet voices that carry the mightiest truths. Third, that every individual choice matters. Even if you stand alone, Adam would say, you still stand. That in itself can shift the tide. And finally, that hope, though fragile, is the most potent weapon of all. Hope, he reminded Clara and Ms. Grayson, inspires courage in the face of fear. And courage, my friends, can topple giants. He left them with one more quote, a middle-aged gem, as he called it. We are not here to curse the darkness, but to light a candle that can guide us through it. In the echoes of Stanton's downfall, that candle flickered bright. And for Adam Navarro, for Clara Dawson, for Sara Grayson, and for countless others, it was enough to know they had made a difference in a world too often inclined to look the other way.